I've been in business for over 30 years, and during that time, I've built over a dozen highly successful companies without being great at sales. I mean, I've always admired people who are really good at selling, meaning that they could go out there and understand their prospects' needs and then sell them in an honest, ethical, moral way. And on the other hand, I really hate people who are hardcore salespeople who just go out there and sell to make money. So I kind of have those two in my head all the time. And I'm going to give you 3 examples of how we've grown faster in business than most of my competitors, even though none of my companies are known for being focused on sales. And I'm talking about making far more profit than my competitors and being a sellable company, meaning other companies want to buy us and have bought us in several industries. That doesn't mean that we've always made more revenue, gross revenue at least, than my competitors. In some cases we have, but in others, our competitors made more gross revenue, sometimes tens of millions more in gross revenue. But they've also spent tens of millions more in ad spend and in advertising, so their margin was lower and their profit was lower and their retention was significantly lower. So what they had was a product or a business that looks kind of like crap on paper, and when they were done with that business, they really only had one choice, and that was to just walk away instead of being sellable for 2 or 4 or 10x multiples. So I said I'd give you 3 examples of how we do this and how you can too. Probably far easier and with far less money than you're spending on your current marketing right now. And the very first example was when I was in the health club industry, which was a company that I built in the 90s and I sold in 2004. And if you don't know much about the health club industry, it's kind of similar to the car dealership industry or the insurance industry, where most of the highest growth companies grow because they're sales companies, meaning the extent to which most health clubs grow is determined by how many people they could drive into their clubs and then sell them memberships. And when I was in that industry, my competitors were constantly price warring, meaning they were running sales to drive more and more and more potential members into their clubs, and then they were adding more salespeople on and training on hardcore sales tactics to close more deals. With that in mind, I'm going to tell you how we put up a club in a highly competitive geographic area where there were 5 other health clubs within a mile of us. And in less than 2 years, 3 of those 5 either went out of business or sold because my clubs were taking their members. And the weird part was that we were one of the highest priced clubs in the area, so we were not discounting in order to get those members, and we weren't putting nearly as much money into our advertising. What we were doing, on the other hand, was we were over-delivering. We started by studying our prospects, finding out exactly what they wanted, finding out what their greatest pains were, and then just delivering results that overcame that pain. And we just gave them what they wanted. And here's the funny thing. Most of my competitors were not only spending a ton of money on their marketing, but they were selling people on the idea of losing weight or getting in great shape. And if you know anything about health clubs, you know that, I don't know, sometimes people like to hang out there after they're done with their workout and get an energy drink or a protein drink or just kind of hang out and talk with their friends. Our clubs were completely different. They were very upscale, and we did not hardcore pitch people to join. But what we did was we found out everything that they hated about other gyms and everything that they really liked about working out. And we built clubs that attracted people who would stick with us for a long time, meaning our clubs had free towel service and free coffee and lounges where people could just kind of hang out before and after their workouts, and workout areas that were super clean, and our clubs never smelled, so our members had a social experience. And the side effect of that was that they came to the club more often, which means that they got in shape faster. And instead of trying to hardcore sell them, our salespeople were trained to give a tour around the club and then allow prospective members to talk with our current members. And if you know anything about advertising, you know that there's a few things that you could do in advertising that will almost always increase conversion. And one of those things, the biggest one of those things, at least in my experience, is testimonials. So by allowing our prospects to talk to our current members, those were the best testimonials we could ever ask for. And the result was that people who were members of other clubs joined my clubs, and when prospects got toured around, my salespeople didn't need to sell them hard because our members sold them without us even having to ask. And that made selling new members super easy. And we've used that tactic in some way in every single company that I've ever been part of since then. The next example that I'm going to give you is kind of less about making more sales and more about making far more money from every sale. Because when I sold the health clubs back in 2004, I came out with my first book, but at the time I had no email list, I had no publisher, and I had no idea how to sell books. And by the way, selling a $39 a book isn't going to make anybody rich, and that's exactly what I had, a $39 book and no idea how to sell it. But I wrote it, and I had hundreds of copies printed, and now I needed to find a way to make it profitable. And I did something that was either very, very smart or amazingly stupid in my first book. And that was, I put my email address in the book, and I told people that they could send me 3 questions, and I'd be super happy to answer those questions because they bought a copy of my book. Now, this was back in 2004 when I was in the health industry. And if I were to do that today, I mean, there's absolutely no way I'd be able to keep up with those questions. But back then, my idea was to over-deliver by giving readers the ability to ask me questions. And at the same time, I was going to kind of use that to find out what they wanted next so that I knew what I could sell them after they bought the book. So every question that came in got answered. But with every answer that I sent out, I asked them questions about what they wanted next. And that one $39 book turned into a large online company that sold workbooks and e-classes and videos and audios, and eventually turned into 42 health membership sites online. And I remember being part of this fitness mastermind back then, which was a group of people in the fitness industry that had online programs, and every one of the people in there was far better at selling their books than I was. I mean, massively better. Most of them were selling thousands of books a week, which was significantly more than I was selling. But after about a year or so of being in that mastermind, there was only one other person in there who even came close to the profit that my companies were bringing in. Now, almost everybody in that mastermind was making more gross revenue than I was. But since they were also spending a bunch of money acquiring those sales, their profit was far, far lower than mine. But at the time, that's all they wanted, right? They wanted to be the big dog. They'd all sit around and they'd share secrets on how they were able to sell more books to more people, but they rarely took the time to do things like survey their customers to find out what those customers wanted. And when they did survey them, they used the information that they got from those surveys just to improve their marketing to sell more people. But as you mature in business, you learn that your front-end sales are your most expensive sales. To scale a company, you need to build relationships with your prospects and your customers. You need to do things that make them trust you. And when you do that, you help far more people, and the customers that you have will bring more customers to you, whether that's by referring people to you or by talking positively about you on social media. And you'll also make far more profit that you could then go out there and invest into growing your company or into growing your personal wealth. Now, the third example that I'm going to give you is kind of my favorite, because out of all the companies in my portfolio, there's one that I enjoy the most, and I only work in that company one day each week. About 15 years ago, I was invited to speak at a business event, and about a half hour or so before I went on stage, the promoter came over to me and he asked what I was going to sell. And I was super confused when he asked that, because I was invited there to talk about how I built and exited companies. And I literally had nothing to sell and really no desire to sell anything. And the promoter kind of looked at me even more confused than I was, because he was expecting a commission from everything that I sold from stage that day. And it was totally my fault, because I just didn't understand the business model at the time. I didn't know that the way promoters make money from events like this is by taking a piece of every sale that speakers make when they're on stage. So we sat down in his office and he explained this whole thing to me, and we talked about what I could sell when I went up there. But the problem was that I didn't have any programs or anything else to sell. And after about, 15 or 20 minutes, we decided that I was going to sell a coaching program, and I was going to charge a bunch of money, and in exchange for that money, I was going to get on the phone with these people one-on-one who bought it for an hour once a week. And this was a very small event where people paid, I think it was like $10,000 per seat to sit in that room and hear me and 2 other speakers talk. So they were highly qualified buyers who had their own businesses, which kind of made them perfect potential buyers for my coaching program. And after I spoke for maybe 2 hours or so, I literally said something like, hey, I'm going to put together a program that allows you guys to speak to me personally once a week if you want to, and I'll help you grow your company just like I've grown mine and just like I grow companies that I invest in if you guys want it. Like, I was really, really humble about this thing. And then I told them the price, and that I was only going to bring 6 people in, because I thought that was all the people that I could work with at the time, because I didn't want to take time away from my companies that I currently had, and I certainly didn't want to take time away from my family. And then I just thanked him and I walked off stage. And after a couple of minutes, the promoter, whose name was Steven, literally ran out and pulled me back in the room, because more than half of the people that were there wanted to get in, which was far more than 6, which freaked me the heck out. And that turned into my consulting firm. And I only work in that firm Wednesdays. And the main program in there was called Club 28. And it's one-on-one, where I personally work with a handful of companies still to this day to help them grow each year. It's expensive to be part of that, but it's the only program like that I've ever seen where somebody who's built and runs a portfolio of their own companies, who's part of 7, 8, and 9-figure brands, stops what they're doing one day a week to help other companies grow. But here's the lesson. I'm really good friends with people who own other very large business consulting programs out there, far, far bigger than mine. And anytime we get together, sitting down, having dinner, talking business, whatever it is, the same question always comes up. They always tell me how much more revenue I could be making if I just started doing things the right way, which is this. Instead of having people go to my website and apply to get into Club 28, and if somebody qualifies, then I get on the phone with them for 30 minutes and I have a personal conversation with them. And if that person gets value out of that 30 minutes and I like them, then and only then do they get an invite to Club 28. Nobody can just pay to get in. But these friends of mine who have much larger businesses say that if I just go out there and do the right thing, like hire salespeople, and then advertise online, and then drive people to those salespeople so they could sell them into a coaching program where other coaches would try to help my clients. That would be much better, they say. And I know this model, and I see it all over. So every time they tell me about it, I understand how it works and how it works so well for other companies. But that's not how my company is built. Every company that I'm part of, whether that's a company that I own or a company that I invest my money into or a company that I invest my time into consulting with, every company grows because I take their growth personally. That's rare, and it limits the number of companies that I could help. But here's what I think makes it much, much better. First, I don't have to spend a ton of money on marketing. Second, I don't have to pay commission to salespeople who probably are going to make a lot of people feel super uncomfortable. Next, I don't have to pay for coaches who honestly have zero experience growing companies, so they would never be able to help companies grow, let alone help them 2, 5, or 10x their growth like I do. And finally, I don't have bad reviews online where every other consulting firm out there has a ton of bad reviews because they're not able to deliver on what they promised because their clients are being coached by people who don't have a track record of building companies. What I do have, and what you will have when you understand how to truly differentiate yourself and how to massively over-deliver to your target audience, what I do have is an amazing amount of success stories and a very small ad budget. And I get to do something that I love to do once a week in a way that's super profitable, and it gives me a chance to give back for all the blessings that I've had in business. You'll grow far faster and far more predictably when you focus more on profit than you do on gross revenue. And you get there by understanding your target audience, by over-delivering to them, and by not getting distracted by everyone else telling you to chase revenue over reviews.